So this is continuing on with the series this month on prosperity is your divine inheritance. And today the topic is betting on a sure thing, which doesn't sound all too bad, does it? My favorite topic, prosperity. My favorite quote, prosperity is your divine inheritance. And today, my favorite realization, this is betting on a sure thing. So today it's my joy and my passion to talk with you about something that is an integral part of our spiritual inheritance. That's our ability and our willingness to grow and expand our spiritual connection with universal truths. Some people have the capability of doing that by themselves, alone, or at least without any formal support or guidance. But most of us choose to associate in some way with organizations, with institutions, and using works by well-known authors, or obtaining more knowledge, deeper understanding, and a sense of acceptance of our own place in the great design of life by having some special or particular connection. In today's world, that may include formal schooling, joining organizations that help us to grow. It may include the use of the electronic wonders that exist for us, like television, CDs, DVDs, apps on our phones or our iPads, and of course the internet. But at some point in our lives, most of us realize that we need a heart connection. We need a place, an association with those of like mind, where we feel accepted, we feel safe, and we feel supported on our spiritual journey. That may be a church, that may be a spiritual center like this. It may be a synagogue, it may be a temple. It may be a large, imposing cathedral for some people. It may be a small, intimate, closely knit spiritual community. But how it looks and what we call it isn't important. How it nourishes us and supports us is. And how our spiritual community flourishes and grows is also a part of the expanded spiritual growth of each one of us. First of all, here at our Center for Spiritual Living West Hawaii, which is connected with the Centers for Spiritual Living, which are international, with offices in Golden, Colorado. At the local level here, we have a board of trustees, which meets periodically to join with me in guiding and governing the affairs of the center. We address a lot of things, and one of those that we shepherd very carefully is the financial well-being of the center. Because we are a business. Our product is spiritual growth and expansion, and we are a business. It's an integral part of the integrity and the prosperity in our spiritual work to manage the business of our center. Incidentally, we have an opening on our Board of Trustees coming up, and if any of you are interested in applying for that, we'd like to talk with you about it. We try a lot of things to ensure the continued growth of income for our spiritual center. Some work, some don't. And we're always open to releasing those that don't in favor of those that do. And always the Board of Trustees and I, as your spiritual leader, hold that high watch. Know the truth of our intentions and know that this spiritual family flourishes and grows. We have a home here in Waikoloa, have had for some time, where we offer Sunday services and classes. We're also expanding, as you know now, our outreach to Waimea and the North Kahala Coast, and to a certain degree now a little bit on the Hamakua Coast as well. So those we reach currently for the most part with workshops or events that we do up in the Waimea area, and we're looking to expand that as this year unfolds. So what's the big deal about this? I mean, you know all this already, right? Well, here's a story that opens the door to my message in all this. And this is the story of a young man who's fresh out of business school, and he answers a want ad for an accountant. He's interviewed by a very nervous man who runs a 3-person business. And the man says, I need someone with an accounting degree. But mainly, I'm looking for someone to do my worrying for me. Excuse me, this young accountant says. I worry about a lot of things, the owner says, but I don't want to have to worry about money. Your job will be to take all the money worries off my back. I see, said the applicant, and how much does this job pay? I'll start you at $85,000 a year. The young man thought about that for a moment, and then he exclaimed, $85,000? How can such a small business afford that? That, the owner said, is your first word. So that's my message. Each of us is an owner in this spiritual center. And none of us wants to worry about its financial well-being, do we? I mean, the truth is, as we work on our own prosperity, we are also working on the prosperity of this center, whose teaching supports us. There's an old saying that God doesn't need our money, and certainly that's true. After all, God is all there is. How could it possibly need money? However, our center exists in a world whose medium of exchange is money. So our continued operation depends on the support of each of us. In fact, that's a subject that frequently comes up for ministers and congregations of all faiths. A priest, a rabbi, and an evangelist were playing their usual Wednesday round of golf and started discussing their weekly collections. This happens, folks, in the real world, that men and women of the cloth talk about collections. Specifically, though, they started to compare how they decided what portion of the collection to keep for themselves and what portion to give to God. So the rabbi said, well, I draw a circle around myself and I toss the money in the air. And whatever lands in the circle, I keep for myself. Whatever lands outside the circle, I give to God. The priest chimed in, well, I use a similar method, except that whatever lands in the circle, I give to God. And whatever lands outside the circle, I keep for my personal needs. The evangelist thought about this dramatically for a long moment. And then he proclaimed, well, I also use the same method, except when I toss the money in the air, I figure whatever God wants, he can take them. Well, it's true. God doesn't need money, ours or anybody or anything else's. However, our center operating as a business does have use for money for its operation. We're supported, as most of you know, entirely by the contributions and gifts of our members and friends. We have no central organization that sustains us financially. We are gloriously free, and I say that with great impetus right now. We are gloriously free of any political or pressure groups. that trade money for favors, or government, which we are also unattached to, which has programs and handouts, but they all have something attached to them that require us to do that we may or may not choose to do or be dedicated or committed to doing. So that's the good news. And it carries with it the realization that we are responsible for our own well-being. So as a church family, we support each other in releasing lack, limitation, restriction in our personal lives. Today, I'm inviting each of you to expand that circle of love and caring to include the center. The truth is, as we grow our own prosperity, we need to remember the prosperity of the teaching that guides, directs, and sustains us. It's kind of like when I talk about when we do spiritual mind treatment, and a week later, a month later, maybe a year later, the intention of that treatment manifests, fully recognizable in our lives. It's so important to remember that we did that work. We did that spiritual mind treatment. We did that spiritual practice, and this is the result of it. And the same thing is true here as well, that remembering that we have learned principles and practices through our connection with the source of our spiritual nourishment is important, whether it happens in 10 minutes, 10 hours, or 10 months. So that's what this spiritual community is here for. Many of you, frankly, are already lovingly, generously, and faithfully supporting this center. Some of you for a very long time already. I also know that many of you are generous supporters of other worthwhile activities and organizations. And this is something that we honor in ourselves and we honor in each other. So as we work on our own prosperity and on the realization that prosperity is our divine inheritance, I'd like to invite each of you, if you haven't already, and I know you have, some of you have, to take a step out in faith in declaring a financial commitment to the spiritual center, to this spiritual center and its message, and to the continuance of its presence in your life and your presence in its life. You don't very often hear me talk about tithing. In fact, you almost never hear me talk about tithing, because I believe we're too spiritually advanced to be limited to giving only 10% or any specific percent of what we've attracted to ourselves, be it money, talent, truth, time, or attention. That in and of itself, that's a limitation. But you'll frequently hear me talk about committed or conscious giving, that is, promising yourself and the place where you receive your spiritual nourishment, and sometimes that's more than one place, that you support that. Some of us do that in outreach to things like NPR and to various activities both on the island and throughout the country, maybe even the world, that are providing spiritual nourishment and encouragement in a variety of ways. You will never hear me talk, either here in this center or about religion in general, about your financial support being a ticket to get you into heaven. But you'll frequently hear me talk about the law of circulation, and that as we open up to share that which we have received in our own lives, we make room for more to appear in our own lives. And today I'd like to invite each of you to join me in thinking about a program which I've mentioned over the last couple of weeks that I would talk about today, called unscheduled income. Unscheduled income? It's really easy to be a part of this, actually, by simply making a contribution over and above what you've already been given in anticipation of a greater income, either unexpected or unscheduled. You know, like from your lottery winnings, for those of you who do that kind of thing. I had a woman one time, and I may have shared this story with some of you at the Porterville Center, who one day, toward the end of the year, in Standing Under Light, stood up and said, "I want to tell you something I've been doing." She said, last year when we had our committed giving program and we filled out our commitment sheets, I studied it for a long time. I took it home and I did spiritual mind treatment and I did some meditation about it, and it was a week before I brought it back and gave it to you. And she said the reason I did that was because at the time I was unemployed. My income over the past year had been up and down and all over, and I was afraid to make a commitment. But she said the longer I thought about it, the longer I realized I was cause to my own effect. I was just spinning around in that. So she said what I decided to do was I decided to commit to giving to the spiritual center 10% of what I expected to earn in the coming year. And she said, I went one step further, and I wrote, and if that increases over what I expect to earn in the coming year, I will tithe 10% of the overage as well. She said, I'm standing here today in October, and I am making more, I've already made more money this year than I have made in any of the past years since I've lived in this area. And so I am giving each week, not just based upon what I expected to make, but I'm demonstrating it. And she said, today I'm going to make a contribution of what I expect to earn through the balance of the year with the increased income over what I expected. Because this stuff is working so well for me, I just want to keep it going. And this was a woman who had been through a lot of really serious personal issues. And she was so excited about this that she just couldn't keep it in until the end of December. She just really needed to share it with her spiritual family. So, as you think about that, this is not pressure, but rather awareness that there are so many things that show up as unexpected income that we never really think about as our having attracted them as a result of our spiritual practice. So, let me give you some ideas on how unexpected income shows up. Or maybe you want to call it unscheduled income. Doesn't matter what you call it. But it's not built into the budget if you are a person who budgets. It sometimes comes from an inheritance that you receive. It certainly comes as a refund on your income tax. Sometimes it can be from stock dividends, interest on, not very often, but once in a while, money market accounts. Think about what you would consider unexpected or unscheduled income. And it's interesting because we've been talking about this in the midweek gatherings, and people have brought up some things that showed up for them that I wouldn't have thought of as unscheduled income, maybe because they haven't happened in my life yet. But now that it's in there, it could happen in any of a variety of ways. And you see, as you open to the universe of unexpected income, guess what? That's what starts to show up. So, over the next, let's say, 6 months, when you have that experience of unexpected or unscheduled income, and you decide that you are going to make a contribution to the center as a portion of that, be sure you just give us a little note. Stick it in an envelope with a little note that says unscheduled or uncommitted income. And we'll just pay attention to that anonymously, but just to see how that works out within our own center and in our other groups that meet. Because we have people in our midweek gatherings who are not ever here on Sundays or seldom here on Sundays, who contribute regularly to the center. We don't pass a basket, as you've noticed, in the midweek gatherings. That's not our intention. But we have people in those groups who make a regular contribution to the well-being of the center because they get this, that they want us to stay and to continue to offer these programs because it's valuable to them. So let's just pay attention to that. Increased awareness, which results in increased prosperity, which results in increased awareness, and so on it goes. And the last invitation I want to offer to you this morning is to actively, caringly, passionately support the growth of the spiritual center. In your prayer treatment work, in your spiritual practices, make it your intention to accept new faces, accept new families, accept new members among us on Sundays, in our classes, and for special events. Make a commitment to bring at least one new person a month, or whenever you can. More often if you're willing. Just bring them to a Sunday morning service. You don't have to put any pressure on them, and neither will I. But as you know, being in the energy here is the message that people who are ready and open receive. Because growth in numbers, obviously, supports growth in income, but even more importantly, it supports the growth in our own hearts and minds. That science of mind is an idea whose time has come in the world. And some of you, and this is really exciting to me, some of you are introducing the principles of our philosophy into other events that you participate in. Not as a pitch to come to our events, but as a way to teach, to share, and to demonstrate the value of these principles. And that is truly what we call sharing the wealth. We've had experiences of these up in Waimea. It's happening right now here in Waikoloa. It's a part of who each of us becomes as we practice this ourselves. We simply begin to take it with us wherever we go. So remember, each Sunday we join together to share our bounty here in socializing as well as the sharing of the message. Sometimes even food snacks. Gee, I had my bacon bowl out this morning, but Lauren's on Maui. Usually one of those has cookies in it. So I may just leave it here until next Sunday and see what happens. But this is one of the many ways that we celebrate our acceptance of the magnificent substance, abundance of the universe that pours through each one of us. It's also an opportunity when guests are here for us to answer questions, be willing to share our experiences and talk about the differences that Science of Mind has made in our own lives, and about what we have to offer here in this spiritual center. One of the things I find, and you've noticed, I'm sure, how often when a brand new person comes and we do standing in the light, they pop up. Have you noticed that? Because they want to share. They don't always know all the protocol, but they want to be a part of that sense of standing in the light and being recognized for having something in motion in a spiritual sense. So the last thing that I want to mention to you is that within the next few months, we'll be introducing a special program called Principles of Financial Freedom. This is a program that was developed by Reverend Lloyd Strong, who was instrumental in writing or editing many of our accredited curricula that came into our merged organization from the United Center for Spiritual Living. We may also address spiritual economics, which we've talked about already in several venues, and that's that magnificent work by Reverend Dr. Eric Butterworth, who was a mover and a shaker in the Unity organization. So all of you are invited to come and participate as we present these ways in which each of us can open our hearts and our minds to accepting our divine gift and inheritance of prosperity. So, by acting on these invitations that I've offered this morning, you can make the difference and be a center of activity yourself in the growth and expansion of our center. By acting on these things I've talked about this morning, you can also ensure that we continue to meet our financial obligations each month, and that our beloved Center for Spiritual Living West Hawaii not only awakens us to humanity, but to the spiritual magnificence to the world around us. So take a step out in faith, declare your own financial commitment to our center, to its message, and to the continuance of its presence in our lives. Join the Unexpected Income Program by making a contribution to the center over and above what you've already been giving as that additional income shows up in your life. That unexpected or unscheduled income. And then actively, caringly, passionately support the growth of the center by welcoming new faces, new families, new members among us on Sundays. Actively, caringly, and passionately encourage the development of new programs. Participate in our classes and the other special events that we put out, like our midweek gatherings. And last but not least, bring somebody new with you. I know some of you have on more than one occasion. Others may feel somewhat reticent about that. Look around the room and realize there isn't anyone in here who wouldn't welcome someone that you would like to bring. Be the one who makes the difference, here and in your own life. Prosperity is first and foremost a spiritual value. Demonstrating it is the gift that you bring this church family out of your own magnificent God-given self. What a blessing you are. And so it is.